Coming up, native astronauts in space. John Herrington explains Nicole Mann's mission at the International Space Station. Plus, U.S. Senator Schatz talks policy for Indigenous communities. It's the largest gathering of Alaska Natives. We preview this year's upcoming AFN conference. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover Indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Ku'otsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start in the West, where a newly named national monument is receiving backlash. The Ute Indian tribe is criticizing the Biden administration for designating Camp Hale as a national monument. The area was a training site for soldiers in World War II. In a statement emailed to ICT, the tribe said the designation was made without tribal consultation and that tribal leaders were excluded from the unveiling event. While the tribe's current headquarters are in Utah, it says the land in Colorado belongs to its Uncompahgre band. President Joe Biden traveled to Camp Hale to unveil the news last week. The Ute Indian tribe said the lands include burial sites of their ancestors. The Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument encompasses more than 53,000 acres of land that is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. Continuing our Native vote coverage in Oklahoma, 5 tribal nations are backing their choice for the state's governor. It goes against incumbent Kevin Stitt, who is a Cherokee citizen himself. Dakota McDowell Wapakichi has the story.
Last week, the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma announced an endorsement for non-native Republican-turned-Democrat Joy Hoffmeister in the state's gubernatorial race at an event center just north of the Oklahoma State Capitol.
Well, he's disappointed me as a Cherokee from early on. I mean, he came right out of the gate looking to fundamentally cut the legs out from under tribes on something that not only helps us, but helps the whole state.
That's what Cherokee Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin had to say about Oklahoma Governor and Cherokee citizen Kevin Stitt. The 5 civilized tribal leaders say that Joy Hoffmeister is the best option for bettering the state.
She supports public schools, she supports health care, she supports education, she supports economic development. When I see that makes me want to support Joy Hoffmeister.
The tribal leaders say they are doing this because of the need to grow Oklahoma and its tribal nations together and not pull them apart.
And I really believe that she has proven that she's of service to the state of Oklahoma and to the people of Oklahoma.
They say this is the first time that the 5 tribes banded together to support a candidate in this race.
But it takes working together. And from when I spoke with Joy, she has it in her heart. She wants to do what's best. So her integrity, just when you first meet a person, you kind of sense of what she truly feels. And that's what I get from her.
There's no way he can match her in the areas of education, simply because she's been in the position where she's been in for many years and also understands where we need to go as far as Oklahoma is concerned.
Now, Election Day across the country is November 8th, and the 5 civilized tribe native leaders are hoping to reel in more votes for Joy Hoffmeister with this endorsement. Reporting in Oklahoma City, Dakota McDowell Wapakichi, ICT News.
In California, the Tolowa Dini Nation is doing its part to raise awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous people. Earlier this year, the nation passed a resolution about the crisis, and just last week, the tribe received $500,000 in grant funding from the U.S. Department of Justice. The tribal nation, which is located 3 miles south of the California-Oregon border, says it plans to use the money to create its first community response plan for MMIP. That includes to gather data and develop partnerships with local law enforcement. Chairwoman Dorothy Waite called the MMIP issue a nationwide public health crisis. Later this month, on October 28th, the nation is hosting a dinner for its 1,900 citizens to address the issue. A new way of learning and sharing the history of the Crow Nation is in the works at the Little Bighorn College in Montana. The school recently received a $1.9 million grant from the Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration. President of the college, David Yarlott, says he is committed to making the Cultural Center, Museum, and Crow Hall of Fame a reality on campus. The facility is being designed by Crow citizen and architect Daniel Glenn and his firm, 7 Directions Architects and Planners. Yarlott estimates the college will need to raise up to $18 million in additional funds. It plans to break ground on the first phase of construction in spring of 2024. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Climate change, missing and murdered Indigenous people, and language loss are just a handful of issues that are heard in the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. This body is made up of U.S. senators whose job is to learn about these difficulties in Native communities and to propose solutions. Joining us today is the chairman of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, which is Hawaii's senior Senator Brian Schatz. Hi, Senator. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So you've been in this position since February of 2021. Tell us about your experience getting up to speed on these issues that affect Native communities.
Well, I think the first thing that I started with is to just listen. You're dealing with lots of individual sovereign nations that have unique trust and treaty responsibilities and relationships with the federal government. And I needed to understand the unique culture, geography, history, language status, reservation status. And so I spent a lot of time listening. And what I heard was nothing about me without me, that tribal consultation was essential. And also that as important as it is to pass individual pieces of legislation, the basic problem in Indian country is disinvestment, is a lack of investment over many, many decades and really generations. And so we set about on an ambitious program to invest more in Indian country and Native communities than the federal government has ever done before. And we did it. Broadband, physical infrastructure, sanitation, healthcare, education. We've invested more in Indian country and Native communities in Hawaii and Alaska than the federal government has ever done before. And I think it's credit to the fact that when Democrats are in charge, we pay very, very close attention to the needs of Native communities. We have never done enough, and this still isn't enough, but it's definitely more than ever.
I want to talk about nominations because there have been a number of nominations that have passed through your committee recently. Tell us about those.
Well, Rosalind So is a star, and she was just confirmed, and she's someone who has great experience within Indian Health Service, and we think she's going to be a real advocate and an asset within the administration. And of course, Assistant Secretary Brian Newland as well has been a friend of Indian country for a long time, someone who I have gotten to know over the last year and a half. And, you know, these issues are not always easy, but he understands the nuance, and he also understands the importance of tribal consultation. You know, when people came to me initially and said tribal consultation is important, it sort of registered in my brain, but not in, you know, in Hawaii, they say it, you know, right here, right in your stomach. I didn't quite understand the importance of it. And now I do. Now I understand that tribal consultation isn't just a box to check. It is an attitude. It is an understanding that you are on a parity. Federal government is at parity with the organizations that have a treaty relationship with the United States. And they have to be treated as though they matter on the front end. I watched your news segment about the new national monument and the Utes who felt left out. Sure, probably as a matter of compliance with the law, tribal consultation was done, but not really. And so what we're trying to do, whether it's climate action or the Violence Against Women Act or infrastructure investments or broadband deployment, is listen to tribes, listen to Indian country first, and let that inform what we ought to do, as opposed to formulating a plan and then telling Indian country about it at the end of the process.
Talking about listening to tribal leaders, I've watched a number of hearings from tribal leaders who have talked about things like MMIWP and even internet access. And what really sticks with me is that they bring their stories of tribal citizens. I remember hearing a tribal leader saying that children in his community had to sit outside of a McDonald's to be able to get internet. In your perspective, what kinds of stories have stuck out to you the most?
It's funny, Aaliyah, thank you for bringing that up. I remember that story. I remember talking about the need for broadband. I've got kids, and when remote learning started in my own home, I work for the government, so I'm not uber wealthy, but I'm in a position so that when our modem didn't provide enough connectivity for basically 4 people being online at the same time, we just drove down to the store and bought another $200 modem. Not everybody has that kind of luxury, and many people don't have connectivity at all. And so remote learning was a catastrophe across the country, but it was in particular harmful for Native communities, which may not have broadband infrastructure in the first place. But that is one that kind of rings in my ears. I remember picturing that kid just try to pick up a little Wi-Fi outside of the McDonald's.
As we continue on in your tenure, what kinds of topics do you plan on addressing in the future?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is essential is that, yes, we've invested more than ever in Indian country, but no, it's not enough. For me, it was about elevating the institution of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. There were little things that were not so little, for example, our staff, all of our staff on the committee were paid less than other committees. And so what I'm trying to do is make sure that the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, just like Indian country, is not an afterthought, that we are always at the table. And so when we passed the CARES Act, Indian country was at the table. When we passed the American Rescue Plan, Indian country was at the table. When we passed the infrastructure bill, there were billions of dollars for Indian country and Native communities. And finally, when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, Indian country was at the table. So why does that matter? There has been a precedent set that when major resources are being expended by the federal government, Indian country, Native communities are no longer an afterthought. We have to consider them as a high priority and put our money where our mouth is. It's certainly not enough. I don't want to take a victory lap here, but it's also important to know when we've made progress. And, certain areas we basically have been investing zero. Broadband is a good example. Now $2 billion for broadband for Indian country. Even in the clean energy space, there's now $20 billion worth of loan authority for tribes to take advantage of the clean energy incentive. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for Indian country, and I'm just going to keep fighting as hard as I can for all the tribes and all the Native people in Hawaii and Alaska that need representation in the federal government.
Well, Senator Schatz, please join us again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When Chickasaw citizen John Herrington was in space in 2002, part of his mission was to help build new areas of the International Space Station. Fast forward to this exact moment, and that's where NASA astronaut Nicole Mann is currently living. Herrington, who was the first Native person in space, joins us now to give us his unique perspective on this mission. Hi, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So take us back to watching Commander Nicole Mann's flight to the ISS on October 5th. What were you thinking as you saw her blast off?
I'm thinking, wow, it's been 20 years. I mean, time has just flown by, and it's great to see a Native person be able to fly to the space station, be a part of the nation's space program, and then hopefully inspire a bunch of Native kids that this is something they can do as well.
Nicole Mann is the commander of this mission. Tell our viewers what that means.
Well, Commander, she has a responsibility for actually going up on board the Dragon to the space station. She'll get up there. There'll be a handover at some point in time during the mission. it's one of these things as a leadership, you want to be in command. You want to have the leadership position to be able to lead the effort on the space station. So it's a very impressive role to have. I'm very proud of her, and I'm sure she'll do very well.
When you were in space, you were there for 13 days, and Nicole Mann is set to be there for a projected 5 months. What do you think that means for her? And maybe provide some context as to how long that is.
Well, I say lucky her. I'm very envious. I would love to have flown on a space station. I was training to fly with 2 Russians. I was a commander, had a medical issue that prevented me from flying long duration, unfortunately. But to be able to see somebody fly for 6 months, there's a lot of issues that go along with that. Certainly, the challenge of being in space for that long. Microgravity has an impact on your body. You lose muscle mass, you lose bone mass, and so you do about 2 hours of exercise every day. A variety of experiments. The thing about when I flew for 2 weeks, and there's working in space and there's living in space. And I think the idea of flying for 6 months is the idea of living in space as well. And I wish her well. I would love to have done that, but it is what it is, right?
Well, the native astronaut community is really small. 2 of you. Do you know Commander Mann personally?
I met her a while back when she was selected, I think, in 2013. I left the office in 2005. So I look at, if you go back 20 years from when I flew, we just started flying the space shuttle. So, about STS-2, STS-3. So in that 20-year gap, so much stuff has changed. I called astronaut crew quarters. I spoke to Lauren Lundy, who runs astronaut crew quarters. She worked there when I was there. And I said, hey, pass along to Nicole, best of luck, congratulations. Also, Koichi Wakata is a Japanese astronaut that I was in the office when I was there. I call him Koichi the Man. He's upstairs as well. So I wished them all well, but I haven't talked to her personally since she was assigned or when she's flying.
I want to talk about spacewalks because you, of course, had the chance to do that 3 times. Do we know yet if she'll get to do any spacewalks?
I understand that she's scheduled to do spacewalks. I understand she's scheduled to do about 200 experiments during the 6 months. I mean, the crew is expected to do 200 experiments. She'll have a chance to step outside. And one of the high point of my professional career was being able to step outside the vehicle and go out and assemble the vehicle that she's on right now. So I'm really glad I had a part in that. It's a challenge. It's a lot of hard work. You have to stop at some point in your mission and really look and appreciate where you are and what you have the opportunity to do on behalf of the United States government, your family, and your friends.
I could only imagine what that feels like. The crew, as I was preparing for this interview, was laughing at me because I'm a little bit of a space nerd. Something that I really love about the ride that Nicole Mann got to take was that the SpaceX Dragon capsule is autonomous. Tell us what that means and how that's different from your mission.
Well, the space shuttle was autonomous to an extent as well. The idea that when you lift off, the computers are actually controlling pretty much everything on the vehicle. The commander is there in the event that something goes wrong. And as one of the crew, I was supposed to be, I supported the commander and the pilot on ascent. If something had gone wrong, we know the procedures, we know what we have to do, and we can take over manually. Even on the space shuttle, we had 5 computers. 4 of the computers talked to each other and constantly went through the process of processing. And luckily, only a couple things, I think one thing went wrong on our launch. And the commander didn't have to push the big red button and take over manually. So it's fun to be able to, you're not looking out the window. You're doing your job. You're paying attention to what your procedures are in the event that something goes wrong. So it is a fabulous ride. I think she took more G's than I did going uphill. I think I only pulled about 3 G's the last minute of launch. I think they pulled a bit more than that. So I'm sure it was a fun ride, and they had a great time going uphill.
Tell us what G's are.
G's, we stand right now on Earth. We pull, 1 G. The idea that gravity is pulling us down 32.2 feet per second squared is the acceleration that we feel right now. As you lift off in the shuttle, you accelerate. So as you accelerate, there's a greater level of pressure against you. So the first 2 minutes of launch, we felt 2 G's. So that's twice what our body weighs. In the last minute of our launch, we were probably pulling 3 G's. So if your arm weighs 10 pounds, now it weighs 30 pounds, and it's a lot harder, to get up and move your arms and things like that. For me, and I'm sure for Nicole, it felt like somebody's sitting on your chest because you're accelerating this way and you feel that pressure against your chest. And then when the engines quit, you go from 3 G's, in my case, to 0 G's instantaneously. And it's like whoever was sitting on your chest has decided to hop off. And now you're floating once you take your seatbelt off, as well as your checklists. And if there's any dirt on the floor, it comes up too. So.
Well, John Herrington, I could ask you 50 more questions, but we're out of time today. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it very much. Best of luck to Nicole on board. Looking forward to chatting with her when she comes home.
Celebrating our unity. That is the theme of this year's conference for the Alaska Federation of Natives. The annual AFN conference is starting on Thursday, and it is easily the largest gathering of Alaska Natives in the state. ICT's Jocelyn Estes is an AFN expert and joins us now from Anchorage to share more. Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi, good to see you.
So start us off at a high level by telling us what kinds of news has historically come from AFN.
Well, I can remember looking back in 2018, then Governor Bill Walker ended his campaign and made the announcement at the Alaska Federation of Natives Convention. And he also issued an apology for the harms that had been done to Alaska Natives over the years. We've had people announce major political contributions, endorsements. Governor Mike Dunleavy signed a bill that made it a law for the state to recognize tribes. So, and then basically AFN is a time when people come together and talk about all the issues of the day. So there's news usually on a wide range of topics.
On Monday, I understand a youth speaker talked about what's important to them. What happened there?
Well, Christiana Edwards, who's Tlingit, gave a talk on the theme of the conference, which is relatives of ours. And she talked about the importance of people reconnecting after the pandemic. And this is the first year that AFN had, and she was at Elders and Youth. Elders and Youth and AFN both were held virtually until coming back together this year. So she talked about the importance of reconnecting with each other, with lands and waters and unity. And it was very inspiring. It was really good to see.
Jocelyn, when you're looking at the agenda this year, what are some of the big ticket items that are happening?
Well, Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland is going to be giving a virtual presentation. The keynote is by Mary Peltola, a Democrat who was elected to fill out the last couple of months of the late Don Young's seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, and she's up for re-election. AFN has a resolution to endorse her and U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski in their bid to be reelected. And Mary's running to be elected to the next full term in the House of Representatives. So those will be a couple of hot ticket items. There will be a panel discussion on responsibilities and the roles of Alaska Native corporations, tribes, and regional nonprofit organizations as far as social responsibilities and self-governance go. That should be really interesting. There will be a session on the Alaska Tribal Child Welfare Compact, which is an agreement between the state and tribes to co-manage the state is going to delegate some of its responsibilities for Indian child welfare to tribes. And this is the first agreement of its kind.
Jocelyn, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I'm wondering if you can preview how much you expect voting rights to be a topic of discussion.
Well, there'll be a session on Get Out the Native Vote, and there's going to be a lot of talk about how to vote because Alaska voted in last year in 2021. Alaskans voted to implement a new voting system, a new voting process. And that is, instead of voting for one candidate, you rank them So there'll be 3 candidates for U.S. House, and you rank them first, second, and third. And then if if none of them get a majority vote, that is 50% plus 1, there's an instant runoff, and the second vote choices of the other candidates go to whoever they cast their ballot for, and then that may put put one person in the lead with a majority. So you can see I'm having trouble explaining it. So they'll be talking about that at the convention and explaining that to people so that everybody can go into the polling booth and know what they're doing. So it's really simple in action, but explaining it is a little hard.
It's a little difficult. Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much. We should note that Mackenzie Allen Charmley is heading to Anchorage right now to join Jocelyn to cover AFN for us. We're really excited to see the stories that you both tell. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.